We all know what it's like to grow older. We've all had experiences, either with ourselves or people that we've loved or cared for. We know what it's like to age. You develop osteoporosis. You get weaker. Your energy level starts to fall. You start developing chronic diseases like diabetes, kidney failure. You get sick with serious illnesses like cancer, heart disease. Eventually, you develop strokes. You develop brain fog, Alzheimer's disease. Or perhaps because of your brittle bones and loss of balance, you fall. You break your hip. The next thing you know, you're bedridden, and months go by. Unfortunately, this is what we think of when we think of aging. We think of aging as frailty. We think of aging as disability. We think of aging as chronic disease. And we think of aging as an inevitable process as long as we live long enough. Sure, we know that some people age worse than others, and some people are dealt a harder hand, but we think that aging is something that is programmed within our bodies as a biologic necessity. Well, I have news for you. It turns out that aging itself may be a disease and not a biological inevitability. Now, I know this sounds crazy, and I know it sounds unusual, but what I'm telling you is coming from the top researchers at Harvard, MIT, Sydney, Japan, and across the globe. These researchers have found that aging is something that is, number one, both preventable, and number two, is caused by certain biological changes that as we grow and understand them better, we can treat. Now, aging itself may be more due to some changes in genes and how genes are turned on and expressed, which proteins are made and how they're managed, and how your body deals with stress over time. Now, the great news about all this is as we're learning more about aging and what causes aging, we now know the different types of things we can do to prevent the damage and totally rethink what it means to be older. If we do certain dietary changes, if we eat differently, and we'll go into more details about how to act, if you take certain supplements, and yes, certain medications, and if you do things like you monitor your blood sugar and other chemicals in your blood more carefully, if you take these certain steps, all of which, I promise you, are easier than it sounds, there's growing research in animals and in humans that you may prevent the very things that we all dread with aging. Think about it. If you could live to be 100 or 110, would you? Your answer would probably be, well, maybe, but it depends on how you felt in those last years. If those last couple years you spent in a nursing home or debilitated in the bed, your answer would probably be no. You want to live quality years. Now, it turns out that we can do things to make those years and potentially decades, the last decades of life, both healthful, vigorous, more lucid, more energetic, and you might even live longer in the process. Imagine if you could live to 100, 110, 120, and for those years, you're productive. You could start a second career, you could learn other languages, you could be there to play with your great-grandkids. It turns out that science now says that this is possible, and we will discuss how to do it. This is Greg Charlop, and thank you for listening.